My dad wasn't my dad, and my real father had been watching me my whole life. At my mother's funeral, a stranger approached me with photos proving he was my biological father. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and like. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you. I'm standing at my mother's funeral accepting condolences from people I've known my whole life when this man approaches me, and he's probably in his 60s, well-dressed, crying, and he says, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Catherine was an incredible woman." And I thank him because I'm on autopilot thanking everyone. But then he says, "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about your father." And I say, "My father is right over there," pointing to my dad who's across the room with my siblings. And this man says, "No, I mean your real father. I mean me. I'm your biological father. My name is Emma Richardson, and I'm 32 years old." And in that moment at my mother's funeral, I learned that the man who raised me wasn't actually my biological father, and the man telling me this devastating news was a complete stranger, except he wasn't a stranger. He said his name was Robert Carson, and when I looked at him closely, I realized I didn't know him. He'd been my soccer coach when I was 12. He was the CEO of the marketing firm where I worked. He dated my college roommate. Briefly, he'd been on the periphery of my life for decades, and I'd never questioned why. "You need to leave," I told him, but he pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. "Your mother wanted you to have this after she died. She made me promise to give it to you. Please read it." Then he left, and I stood there holding this envelope at my mother's funeral, and I couldn't process what he'd just told me. After the funeral, when everyone had gone home, I finally opened the envelope, and inside was a letter from my mother in her handwriting, and it said, "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and Robert has finally told you the truth. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, but I didn't have the courage to tell you while I was alive. Robert Carson is your biological father. Your dad, the man who raised you, knows this, and he chose to raise you as his own anyway because he loved me and he loved you. Robert and I had a brief affair 33 years ago when your dad and I were separated. When I found out I was pregnant, I reconciled with your dad, and we decided together that he would be your father in every way that mattered. But Robert wanted to be part of your life too, and we made an arrangement. He would never tell you who he was, but he could be near you, could watch you grow up, could be involved from a distance. I know this sounds crazy, and I know you're angry, but please understand I did what I thought was best. Robert has loved you from afar your entire life. Your dad has loved you as his own daughter. You have been blessed with two fathers who both loved you even if one couldn't claim you. I'm sorry for the deception. I love you forever, Mom." I read the letter 5 times trying to make it make sense, and then I went to confront my dad, the man I'd called Dad my whole life, and I said, "Did you know?" And he started crying and said, "Yes, I've always known." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "Because you're my daughter, Emma. Biology doesn't change that. I changed your diapers and taught you to ride a bike and walked you down the aisle at your wedding. I'm your father." And I said, "But you lied to me for 32 years. And he said, "I protected you from a truth that would have hurt you." And maybe he was right, but I was so angry I left his house and didn't speak to him for 2 weeks. I called Robert Carson and demanded to meet him, and we met at a coffee shop, and I said, "Tell me everything." And he did. He told me about the affair with my mom, about finding out she was pregnant and wanting to be involved, about my dad agreeing to let him be near me as long as he never revealed the truth. "I was your soccer coach," he said. "I volunteered to coach your team when you were 12 just so I could spend time with you. I went to all your games, cheered you on, taught you corner kicks. You were so talented, and I was so proud." "That's insane," I said. "That's stalking. I know how it sounds, but I just wanted to know you. I attended your school plays, your graduation. I was there when you didn't know I was there. Where else were you?" He pulled out a photo album, and it was full of pictures of me through the years. Me as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, as an adult. Pictures taken from a distance showing me at various stages of my life doing normal things, playing in the park, at school events, and my wedding. "You've been watching me my entire life? I've been loving you my entire life. There's a difference." "No, there isn't. This is creepy and wrong, and I can't believe my mother allowed this." He looked hurt, but he kept talking. "When you graduated college, I pulled strings to get you hired at my company. I wanted you to work somewhere I could keep an eye on you, make sure you were advancing in your career. I've been your mentor from a distance. You're my boss? You hired me because I'm your daughter? I hired you because you're brilliant and talented. Being my daughter was just a bonus. I felt sick because suddenly my entire career felt fake. Had I earned my promotions, or had they been given to me because my secret biological father was the CEO? What about Jessica? I asked. Jessica had been my college roommate, and she'd briefly dated an older man our senior year. You dated my roommate? I wanted to be closer to you. She talked about you all the time. It helped me know what was happening in your life. You used my friend to spy on me. I never hurt her. We dated for 3 months and ended amicably. She still doesn't know who I really am. I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my arm. Please, Emma. I know this is a lot, but I've loved you since the moment I knew you existed. I've missed every Father's Day, every Christmas morning, every important moment because I couldn't claim you as mine. I've watched you live your life in the shadows. Don't shut me out now that you finally know the truth. But I did shut him out. I went home to my husband and told him everything, and he was appropriately horrified. He's been stalking you your whole life with your mother's permission? That's insane. I agreed, but part of me was also curious. I went through my memories looking for Robert and found him everywhere. The coach who believed in me, the CEO who promoted me, the man at my wedding who I didn't recognize in the photos, but who was there in the background, my mother's friend who came to family events occasionally. He'd been woven into my life so thoroughly I'd never noticed. I hired a private investigator to find out what else Robert had done, and what the investigator found was extensive. Robert had set up a trust fund for me that I'd receive when I turned 35. He'd paid for part of my college tuition anonymously through a scholarship. He bought the house I lived in and sold it to me for half its value through a shell company, so I'd never know. He'd been financially supporting me my entire life without me knowing. He's essentially been a parent to you, the investigator said. He just couldn't tell you. I confronted my other siblings to see if any of them knew, and they were shocked. My brother said, "So you're only our half-sister?" And I said, "I guess so." And he said, "That's weird, but you're still my sister," which made me cry. My sister was angry at our parents for lying, and she said, "What else did they lie about? How do we know we're who they said we are?" I reached out to Robert again because I had more questions, and we started meeting regularly, and slowly over months, I got to know him as a person, not just as this creepy shadow figure who'd been watching me. He told me about his life, about never marrying because he couldn't have the woman he loved, about building his company from nothing, about the hole in his heart where I should have been. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he said, "but I want you to know that every decision I made was because I loved you. I stayed away when your mother asked me to. I watched from a distance when that's all I was allowed. I would have given anything to be your dad officially, but I respected the arrangement your parents made. Why didn't you fight for custody? Why didn't you demand paternity rights? Because your dad was a good father and you were happy, and I didn't want to disrupt your life for my own selfish needs. I put you first even when it killed me." I started having dinners with Robert once a week and getting to know him and discovering that we had a lot in common. The same sense of humor, the same work ethic, the same love of terrible action movies. My husband was skeptical at first, but eventually he saw that Robert genuinely cared about me and wasn't trying to replace my dad. He was just trying to finally have a relationship with his daughter. My dad was hurt that I was spending time with Robert, and we had several difficult conversations where I explained that having a relationship with my biological father didn't mean I loved him any less. "You're my dad," I told him. "You raised me and loved me, and you'll always be my father. But Robert is also my father biologically, and he's been part of my life all along without me knowing, and I need to process that." Eventually, my dad and Robert met, and it was awkward and tense, but they both loved me, so they tried. They would never be friends, but they reached an understanding. They were both my father in different ways, and they needed to coexist. I took a DNA test to confirm what I already knew, and it came back showing Robert was definitely my biological father. I also discovered through the DNA matching service that I had half-siblings. Robert had 3 other children from relationships after my mother, and I reached out to them. They were shocked to learn their father had a secret daughter he'd been watching for 32 years, but they welcomed me into the family, and now I have 3 additional siblings I never knew about. My mother's death brought all these secrets to light, and in a weird way, I'm grateful, even though I'm also angry at her for not telling me while she was alive. I would have liked to talk to her about it, to understand her reasoning, to ask her all the questions I now have that will never be answered. Robert tells me stories about my mother, about their affair, about the love they shared briefly, and it helps me understand her better. She wasn't perfect, she made mistakes, but she tried to do what was best for everyone, even if it meant lying for decades. The weirdest part is recontextualizing my entire life through this new lens. That soccer coach who believed in me wasn't just a nice volunteer, he was my father desperately trying to be involved. That scholarship that paid for college wasn't random, it was my father making sure I got an education. That amazing job opportunity wasn't just luck, it was my father using his influence to help me. My entire life has been shaped by Robert's invisible hand, and I don't know how to feel about that. Sometimes I'm grateful that I had two fathers looking out for me, even if I only knew about one. Sometimes I'm angry that I was denied the chance to know Robert as my father. Sometimes I'm confused about what's real in my life and what was orchestrated. My therapist says I need to accept that both things can be true, that Robert's actions were both loving and inappropriate, that my mother's choices were both protective and dishonest. Life is complicated, and people are complicated, and families are messy. I'm still figuring out what my relationship with Robert will look like long term. He wants to be dad, but I already have a dad. He wants to make up for lost time, but we can't get back 32 years. He wants to be a grandfather to my kids, but they're confused about who he is. We're taking it slow and trying to build something real instead of the fantasy relationship he's had in his head all these years. My real dad, the man who raised me, is still my dad, and that will never change. He's the one who sat with me when I was sick, who taught me to drive, who gave me away at my wedding. Biology doesn't erase 32 years of actual parenting. But Robert is also my father, and he deserves some acknowledgement of that, even if his methods were questionable. Next month is Father's Day, and for the first time in my life, I'll be celebrating two fathers. I bought them both cards. I'm taking them both to dinner, separately because together is still too awkward. I'm acknowledging that I'm blessed to have two men who love me, even if the circumstances are weird and complicated. My mother took her secrets to the grave, but they didn't stay buried. The truth came out eventually, like it always does. And now I have to live with that truth and figure out how to integrate it into my understanding of myself and my family. I'm Emma Richardson Carson, daughter of two fathers, product of a complicated family history, still figuring out who I am in light of everything I've learned. It's a work in progress, but at least now it's based on truth instead of decades of carefully maintained lies.